Yes, apologies about the time change. I actually very nicely have two smachot that I have to go to. So we needed to make it an hour earlier. I have a bat mitzvah and a wedding today. So all good things. A lot of people shared with us they may need to watch this later because of this time change. But I also wanted to mention that my father's yahrzeit was on Friday. So I actually, full disclosure, made a siyum with my brothers on Sotah. We've been following the Daf Yomi cycle. But I would also like to dedicate, this learning in his memory as well. I think I've mentioned many times on the podcast that a lot of my learning is really from my father, who loved to learn with me and was an excellent and well-known teacher besides being a physician. His name was Michael Osband. So again, this should be for his Ilui Nishmas, Melch Gershon Chana ben Chasa Hashav Eliezer. So thank you everybody for that. And with that, I think we will get started. So I guess we'll just start with some ending thoughts about Masechet Sotah. I personally found the end to be very, very sad. That last chapter to be very poignant about the description of sort of everything that gets lost when somebody passes away. And especially because my brothers and I were learning this from my father, we thought a lot about this. So I'll just share with you what when Anne will read the end, but if you remember what the end talks about, where it says that Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi says that, that when Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi dies, that there was no anava, no yirat chet anymore, right? There was no humility and no fear of sin. And then two Amoraim, remember Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi lives in Eretz Yisrael, and he's the end of the generation of the Tanaim. And then, lo and behold, comes these two Amoraim, and what do they say? They basically say that that they say no, that isn't true. I have one says no, I have anava, one says no, I have yirat chet. And so, to me, I think the moral of all of that is that Sotah, which is particularly a Masechet about something that we no longer do, right? And also, if you really read Masechet Sotah, interestingly, we don't see examples of it. It's never like the Tanaim or Amoraim say, I saw this once in the Beit HaMikdash, and this is how it was done, right? So it's really all theoretical halacha. So as much as I think for us modern learners, Sotah isn't necessarily the most pleasant topic, but it's also sad that they didn't even have examples that they could give of the Sotah to even talk about. And so I think that's why that last parak is actually placed in Sotah, because in a way it's the Tanaim and Amoraim expressing their sadness that there isn't a Sotah anymore, right? Because remember the Mishnah talks about, because there was so much adultery, they basically had to end it. And so they didn't even have examples of it anymore. And so I think what our job is that whenever we think the past has sort of been lost, we have to be like those Amoraim who later come and say, no. We actually carry those character traits. Like we actually do those things. Like we have to basically, it's our responsibility to carry those things that we see in the past and bring them into future generations. So to me, I think that really was what the moral of this Masechet was. As complicated as Sotah could be, right? I still think there was what to learn about Shalom Bayit and marriage. And what are those things that we can learn from that Masechet that we can still take with us, even though Sotah is not practiced anymore?
So I'm going to come at it from a different angle, and that's going to lead into, we'll have Leanne first, but our guest speaker today, Rabbanit Dina Rock, I have long paid attention to the Mishnah in Sotah that says that perhaps women should not be learning Torah at all, or perhaps there's an obligation to do so. And the learning it all in context and at the speed that we go really kind of helped round out that Gemara for me, the Mishnah and then the Gemara on it. And again, I raised this question, and I raised it on the episode, and I think I will continue to do so, that the position of Rabbi Eliezer, when he says that if you teach your daughter Torah, you'll teach her to finagle through the issues of Sotah to the extent that then you're teaching her how to be promiscuous. And I feel like, no, Rabbi Eliezer, you're missing it, right? Which is maybe not a fair thing to say, given that he's Rabbi Eliezer, but what happens afterwards in those dapim is that discussion where it says like, but these women were righteous and that they cared. And I feel like the explosion of women's learning that has taken place before my eyes, right? Meaning I learned Gemara in high school, but so many people, I'm already getting on the upper end of the women who learn in terms of age, right? And so the number of, I mean, who grew up learning, obviously the number of people who are learning nowadays, I've been out of high school a few decades now, right? So I feel like it's exploding, and it's the righteousness, I think, that Rebbe Lezer didn't kind of give enough credit. Again, I'm wary of saying this about Rebbe Lezer, but it feels that way, right? When you say like, what are you thinking, that everybody's going to be sneaky and they're going to learn to be sneakier? Okay, yes, the manner of learning Gemara gives people pause. They stop and they ask more different other kinds of questions. And I don't think anybody who has joined the endeavor of learning Daf Yomi, I don't think anybody has come out of it, sneakier with a let's put one over on that Torah kind of approach. And I feel like the Gemara itself recognized that, even if that particular view in the Mishnah did not. And of course, there's Ben Azai's view in the Mishnah as well. So I found that the position about women's learning to be very welcome, even though it wasn't really the main topic in any case, of the whole Masechet. But that's where it that was one thing that stood out for me throughout. Do we see Leanne? I saw you earlier,
Yes, she's
Leanne.
here. Yes.
Okay.
All right. So before we hear from Rabbi Nidina, we're going to have our poet in residence. I think we're the only Talmud podcast that can claim this. I just want to
Baruch
say
Hashem.
that we have a poet also with us. Rabbi Nidina will explain this to you later, but it's amazing. Okay, so I'm going to pin Leanne, and I think I embarrassed Leanne. Okay.
Good morning, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, because I'm doing this from a hotel, like elevator shaft. So let me give this a try. Good morning, everybody. And I wanted to tell you that I really enjoyed this Masechet. But when trying to figure out what to write, I tried to write what I felt was the base for me. So, for better or for worse. Here we go.
Please just put your finger on
The
these.
first one is about suspicion, because I remember learning about suspicion as being the base of suspicion. Crawls in under the door like a worm enters the spaces between your fingernails. Suspicion, an invisible poison, not seen, not heard, but felt in each hair of your arm, each muscle twinge, each spasm of anger in your belly. Suspicion slips in and attaches itself like a tick that crawls on the ground and settles in, sucking your blood, one red drop at a time. And then suspicion slowly spoils and begins to smell so bad, so strong. It won't go away.
Leanne, we lost you
Yeah.
like 2 minutes ago. If you could talk a little bit louder into the mic.
Okay.
Sorry.
Here we go. Suspicion slips in and attaches itself like a tick that crawls on the ground and settles in, sucking your blood, one red drop at a time. And then suspicion slowly spoils and begins to smell. Smell so bad, so strong. It won't go away. It clings to you, stinges you, strangles. Suspicion causes your heart to shrivel, your judgment to lapse, your brain to swell. Still, it grows magnified until it is larger than you. It hovers stronger than your happy home, stronger even than love. Suspicion, stronger even than love, stronger even than the fine dust ground into water. That's the first. And if you can still hear me, I'll read the second one. which is called 5,000.
Right. So just to be clear, Leanne wrote 2 for us this time, which was very, very nice. Thank you.
5,000 cups of coffee. 5,000 opportunities to say I love you. 5,000 tiny moments. 5,000 missed opportunities. 5,000 nights of laying shoulder to shoulder on a warm bed. 5,000 sunrises together. 5,000 mundane conversations. 5,000 dreams of entwined futures. 5,000 moments behind closed doors. 5,000 frustrations, 5,000 arguments, 5,000 silences, 5,000 tears, 5,000 tossings and turnings, 5,000 demands, 5,000 fist poundings, 5,000 opening the doors, 5,000 goodbyes, 5,000 pauses, 5,000 returns, 5,000 reconciliations, 5,000 opportunities for trust, 5,000 opportunities to keep flinging, 5,000 realizations that love is all we have. One time, never to drink bitter water. Thank you for listening, and I apologize if you couldn't hear me here in this hotel. Thank you.
Thank you, Leanne. If you could send us the links, everybody always likes to see the actual links. And we've already discussed with Leanne about publishing this book when we're done with Dafyomi together. But thank you. But I think, as always, you always capture sort of the emotional piece to it, like what this experience must have been like for the Sotah herself to be suspected. All right, Anne, I will hand it over to you now.
Okay, it is my great pleasure to introduce Rabbanit Dina Rock. She is a core member of the faculty at Midreshet Lindenbaum in Jerusalem, where she teaches Talmud and Halakha. She also coordinates their Midot Scholars Program. Before she made Aliyah in the summer of 2010, she served as the Talmud Department Chair at Mayanot Yeshiva High School for Girls in Teaneck, New Jersey. She holds a BA in Biology and Jewish Studies from Yeshiva University's Stern College for Women, and MA in Bible from the Bernard Revel Graduate School, and was a member of the first graduating class of the Yeshiva University's Graduate Program for Advanced Talmudic Studies, GPATS, which of course is when I got to know her back in the day. We're very, very pleased to have you here. And I think I'm just going to turn the floor over to you. You see, we're a comfortable group of people here. Folks, if you have questions for Dina, feel free to put it in the chat, and we'll also open up for questions at the end.
Okay, thank you so much. I'm excited to be here, and really those poems were amazing. So thank you for sharing them. I would also love to see the text. Okay, really, what an amazing group. Okay, so at least Anne introduced a little bit of my background, but so I'll just explain what my plan is a little bit to go through some of the sources that sort of deal with the issue of women learning, because that issue did come up in Masechet Sotah, where Rabbi Eliezer said, as Anne referred to, that anybody who teaches his daughter Torah is teaching her either sexual impropriety or teaching her to just teaching her silliness because she won't understand it. So a lot of the sort of, I don't know, a lot of the discouragement or anti, feelings against women learning sort of stem from a Mishnah that's found in our Masechet that we just finished. So towards that end, I want to go through some of the sources that help justify, well, then why are we doing this? And how do we explain that? Again, as Anne just mentioned, I teach Gemara for a living to girls and young women. So, how do we justify that given that statement from Rabbi Eliezer in the Mishnah and Sotah? So I want to do that. And then also even to share a little bit of my own experiences, because unlike Anne, I went to a high school that did not believe in teaching girls Gemara. And therefore it was not a given for me. And when I first did begin to sort of dive into this world, it actually caused me a great deal of angst. And some of my teachers spoke to me sort of feeling that I was going off the derech, off the path, by engaging in, sort of beginning to learn Gemara in a serious way. So I think that was partially why Anne even asked me to do this. I'm sure she herself would be quite capable of giving the text-based part of the shir. but sort of a lot of the angst which she was blessed not to have to go through because of going to a high school that already supported it. I did sort of go through, and I hope I gained from it, but either way, at least it got me an invitation to talk on this. Anyway, so without further ado, I'll start with the sources to sort of give us background about how the whole topic develops, and then I'll share some of my personal experiences. Okay, so I'm going to share screens that you can see the sources, and Anne and Yardena, if at any point you think I should be moving faster or slower, I guess anybody actually, you can let me know. Both my rate of speech, I tend to talk too fast, and also if you want me to like just, whatever, cover the sources faster. Okay, but here we go. Okay, so I'm going to do share screen. Here we go. Okay, let me just move this so you can see it. Okay, there we go. Okay, so really the topic actually begins not even with Masechet Sotah, actually starts with a source that we're going to get to soon in, I don't know, 4, 5, 6 months or so, like in Masechet Kiddushin. So right, we're doing Gittin and then we'll get to Kiddushin. Where basically the Gemara learns simply the fact that we're exempt, that as women, we're not obligated to learn. Now, the reason that it's important, though, to emphasize not obligated is there are a bunch of things that women are not obligated to do, but we're still encouraged to do them, such as hearing shofar in Rosh Hashanah, sitting in a sukkah, shaking lulav and etrog, counting Sfirat HaOmer. There's lots and lots of things that just because we're technically exempt, we're still encouraged. So we'll still have to understand where just because this source in Kiddushin says that we're not obligated, it's only once we get to the Mishnah in Masechet Sotah that it actually becomes discouraged. But still, step one is simply seeing that we're not obligated. So this source actually I'm going to do, I think, outside because it can become, I don't want to, again, take too long. It could take a half hour just to go through the source. But basically what happens in this Gemara from Masechet Kiddushin, that again, we will get to in Daf Yomi in just a few months, basically roots women's exemption from learning Torah, because, by the way, it does not fit the regular rules, right? The regular rule is if something is a positive time-bound commandment, then we're exempt. But learning Torah is dafka like the Hagita bo yomam valayla, talk Torah 24/7. It is not time-bound, and therefore, in theory, we should be obligated. However, the Gemara comes and it learns, it really starts from this pasuk that we're kind of all familiar with, because we say it in Shema every day, right? That you shall teach your, and here's where it becomes kind of iffy. I would have intuitively thought to translate this as, you shall teach your children, just like we always translate Bnei Yisrael as the children of Israel. However, if you look at the very last line of the Gemara, they end up learning this pasuk as v'limadatem otam et b'neichem. Again, this pasuk from Shema, you shall teach your b'neichem. They say v'lo b'notechem, meaning they end up learning this pasuk very specifically as you shall teach your sons, b'neichem, your sons, b'neichem v'lo b'notechem. That therefore a father has an obligation to teach his son's Torah, but not to teach his daughter's Torah. And then the Gemara also explains how, because of what's called a kriyu ketiv, that word v'limadatem, right, which means you shall teach your, again, son's Torah. If you notice, really the word v'limadatem, you shall teach, should have a yud, right? It should be lamed yud, v'limed, to teach. It's written in the Torah without a yud, so that it could be read, if you just look at the word, right? I did not put nukudot, I did not put dots. You could read it as bilimadatem, to learn, right? Limed with a yud, limed is to teach, lamad is to learn. Therefore, they basically make an equation between learning and teaching. And therefore they say, well, since her father is not obligated to teach her, because again, he's only obligated to teach his sons, but not his daughters. Therefore, because of then the linkage between being taught and learning yourself, because again, of the kriyu ketiv, that you could read it, v'limadstem doesn't have the yud. Therefore, they say, since her father's not obligated to teach her, she also is not obligated to learn. And it's basically because of that, this phrase that we say all the time in Shema, right? Which again, they're learning is you shall teach your sons, not your daughters. We therefore learn both that a father is not obligated to teach his daughter Torah, only his sons, but not his daughters. And that because of that linkage between learning and teaching, she also is not obligated to teach herself. She's not obligated to learn. Okay, that's sort of step one. But as I said, from this, all we would know is, okay, I don't have to learn, but like, I don't have to sit in a sukkah either. And certainly it's encouraged, and to go hear shofar and to shake daled minim and to count Sfirot HaOmer, et cetera, et cetera. All this says is I don't have to. It's not saying that I shouldn't. However, that's when we get to the famous Mishnah that again, we learned in Masechet Sotah, where the Mishnah says, the beginning part talks about how even before she finishes drinking, her, limbs start to, explode and be, her blood vessels, everything is like popping and exploding. But it then had gone on to say that, here, I'll start from even the non-bolded part. Right? Hopefully this sounds familiar to all of us, that if she has merits, maybe this won't actually happen immediately, that even if she is in fact guilty of adultery, maybe she won't start exploding right away. And it says, right? There's, merits that might make it, might delay the punishment by a year, even 2 years. Even 3 years could be she'll drink and be guilty and yet not explode immediately because her merits are delaying it. And comes now the bold part. Because of this, Ben Azai says a man is obligated to teach his daughter Torah. So that if she drinks and does not explode immediately, of course, she knows that she's really guilty. Ben Azai says a man must teach his daughter Torah so that if she drinks, she'll know that it's her merit that's suspending her punishment, rather than her just thinking, oh my gosh, the whole Torah is a joke. Like, I know I'm guilty. I just drank. I should be exploding right away, but I didn't. Basically, he should teach her Torah so that she'll know, not so fast. You are guilty. And the Torah knows that, and God knows that, and like the Torah is not a joke. You will explode, don't worry. It's just that you must, have done some good things in your life, possibly including learning Torah. The point being, you should know, make sure that the girls who drink this or the women who drink this know the halacha, that if they drink and don't explode right away, they'll know that it's just because, that's part of the system, that it could be delayed. Again, it's a little, I have to say, right, a little disappointing. I would have wanted our hero, right, the guy who's saying, Torah, a man is obligated to teach his daughter Torah. I would have loved it if he had said, not so that if she's adulterous and she's guilty, she'll know whatever. I would have loved it if he said, because she too should have access to Devar Hashem and should have access to the world of learning and be able to connect to her creator in that way. Like, that would have been nice. Okay, we don't get that. But he does at least say that a father should teach. But comes the next famous line where it says, Rabbi Eliezer Omer, Kol Hamalamed et Vito Torah Lamda Tiflut. He's basically saying, no, do not teach your daughter Torah. And anyone who does teach his daughter Torah is teaching her, again, this word tiflut, which is understood in 2 different ways. Either it's understood as basically, actually, we can even take a look, like the Rambam basically says, basically, the Rambam ends up saying it's like just silliness, like she just won't understand. We'll see that more coming soon. Basically, the Rambam says it's teaching her silliness. She just won't get it. Ironically, the opposite interpretation, which actually fits the context better of what happens next in the Gemara and in the end of the Mishnah, is actually to say the opposite. Women are so smart and so like clever that if you would teach us Torah, we'll use our learning to kind of like twist it to our own end so that we'll figure out how to sin in ways that we'll be able to get out of being punished. Appointing, everybody agrees that Rabbi Eliezer is definitely saying, do not teach your daughters Torah. And then it's just not clear, is his reason because like women are so unsophisticated that we won't understand? Or is it because women are so smart and clever that we'll understand so well that we'll use it to like in a cunning way, use it to sin but get out of punishment? But either way, he's definitely discouraging it. Okay, even with this, again, the fact that we saw we're not obligated, even we see Rabbi Eliezer thinks it's a bad idea. Even so, I would have still thought to say, no problem. For those of us who want to be able to learn and learn in a serious way and learn even Gemara, let's just say we paskin like Ben Azai. Again, even if we don't love his reason, bottom line is we've got a hero there in the Mishnah. We've got somebody saying that a man is obligated to teach his daughter Torah. Why can't those of us who want to learn just like hang our hats on him and just say, okay, we're going like Ben Azai and we're like in his camp, not Rebbe Eliezer's? The reason that ends up not even being an option is because all of the poskim, like one by one, all quote the statement of Rabbi Eliezer that anybody who teaches his daughter Torah is teaching her tiflut. Again, whether that means she won't understand or means she'll be too cunning, but all the poskim quote Rabbi Eliezer, who discourages fathers from teaching their daughters Torah, and none of them quote are, again, it's on the one hand, I want to call him my hero. On the other hand, again, I don't love his reasoning, but still, in theory, had they at least quoted him, it would have meant that they're obligated, but none of them quote him. So just that we can see that, for example, well, it comes to some of the others, just so you can see, like, say, for example, here, the Rambam, just where my cursor is, we'll go back to other parts of the Rambam. But the Rambam, for example, says, right? The rabbis say, Shelo yilamed adam et bito Torah, right? The rabbis say, do not teach your daughter Torah. You can see from here how he understands tiflos. He said, "Mipnei sherov hanashim ein da'atam muchvanot lahitlamed." Right? Most women, their minds are just not directed towards learning. Elahein motziot divrei Torah ledivrei havai lefi anyut atan. But rather, they'll turn words of Torah into words of nothingness and silliness because of the poorness of their minds. Point being, we see that the Rambam, first of all, we could see how he explains tiflut as she won't understand. But bottom line is, he's quoting Rabbi Eliezer, not our hero Ben Azai, and he's saying, don't do it. Don't teach your daughters Torah. And the Shulchan Aruch in the next source, literally word for word verbatim quotes the Rambam. Bottom line is, again, these are two just of our major poskim, right? The Rambam, the Shulchan Aruch, but all the poskim quote Rabbi Eliezer saying, don't do it. Which is why it kind of, to be honest, the burden of proof rests on us. Like, I understand why my high school teachers were against it. When you just open up the books and you open up the sources, they're all quoting Rabbi Eliezer. They're all quoting this line of, if you teach your daughter's Torah, you're teaching her tiflut. Again, either immorality or silliness, she won't get, whatever it is. Rambam, Shulchan Aruch, they're all saying, don't do it. Which therefore, again, turns the spotlight and the burden of proof on us. So what are we doing here, right? How am I, in fact, doing Daf Yomi and, making the Siyum with all of you and teaching my students in Midrasha Lindemam and whatever it is? Like, so how do we justify, all of what's going on here? So to sort of shift now into at least some of the more positives, there's a few critical points that I think are so important to be able to answer this question. The first critical thing, I think, is to realize that it was never usher. I really, truly, like, again, I'll show you inside what I just totally am convinced about this, that when the Rambam and the Shulchan Aruch and all the other poskim are quoting Rabbi Eliezer, their language is not language of isser. It's not language of halachic prohibition. It's language of, I think it's a bad idea. And the reason that is so critical, again, in a second, I'll show it. Don't just take my word for it. I'll show you why I'm totally convinced that that's true. The reason that's so critical is, had the Rambam and had the Shulchan Aruch really paskins, it is usher for a woman to learn Gemara, I wouldn't be here. The bottom line is the fact that they're not saying usher, they're discouraging it. They think it's a bad idea. So I can't come and disagree with the Rambam and the Shulchan Aruch against their psak halacha. But if they're simply, suggesting something as advice, so even their advice we need to take seriously. But advice is something that then, yes, there's at least room to say, well, is this advice applicable? Is it still good advice now? With halacha, not. With advice, yes. And so it's a really, really critical piece. The other, and we'll take a look in a second to see why I think so clear cut that they're not saying us or they're just giving advice. But one other additional piece that I also want to start with is also feel that it's critical to say that our poskim, or at least my poskim, the poskim of my world, are not only in favor of women learning Gemara in the sense of begrudgingly being like, all right, fine, if you really insist, which we'll see there is that voice also. But the rabbis who are my heroes, so to speak, they encourage it. They think it's wonderful. They think women should learn Gemara, and in fact, even did it themselves, meaning taught the first Gemara Shurim, as we'll see, and encouraged their daughters to. And that, I think, is also a critical piece, that even with all this, I don't think I could just come along and say, well, I think the Shulchan Aruch or the Rambam or whatever are wrong. The fact that our poskim, again, we'll see them inside coming soon. Rav Soloveitchik, who started the high school, right, that Anne went to in Boston, and Yardain, I think both of you, right, I think went to Maimonides in Boston, which the Rav started it with the female students, like their male counterparts, learning Gemara. the fact that our poskim are behind it, that is critical. We still have to understand, okay, to be honest, even Rav Soloveitchik, even somebody of his stature, cannot just toss out a Rambam, a Shulchan Aruch. How could even Rav Soloveitchik start that high school such that Anna and Yardena could go and learn Gemara already in high school? Like, how could he do that? So that's where now I'll go back and say the fact that it was never usher. It's so clear that it was never usher. Okay, how can I say that? So number one is, as we saw, right, the line of Rabbi Eliezer, let's go back to it for 1 second, right, our line from Sotah. Rabbi Eliezer's line is here, Rabbi Eliezer Omer, right where my cursor is, Hol hamelami bito Torah lamda tiflot. Anybody who teaches his daughter Torah, notice he does not say anyone who teaches his daughter Gemara. He does not say anyone who teaches his daughter Torah Sheba'al Peh. He says Torah, which means that really anybody who's going to be just taking Rabbi Eliezer and blindly saying, listen, Rabbi Eliezer said it, I'm doing it, then really they can't have Parshat HaShavua class either. They can't have Chumash class either. And almost everybody, listen, there are some groups who really, really take it to the extreme and in fact don't teach their daughters even Parsha or Chumash. But not just in our world, even in most sects of Judaism, even in Haredi and whatever, are teaching their daughters Chumash and Parsha. So it's important to realize even they are not just taking Rabbi Eliezer at face value. Now, where do they get it from to make a distinction between Torah Shebechtav, the written law, between, say, learning Tanakh versus learning Gemara? Is from the Rambam. The Rambam is the first to really make this distinction. Again, Rabbi Eliezer across the board says, don't teach your daughter Torah. It's the Rambam who comes along and makes that distinction. Okay, but let's look at that Rambam inside, because that Rambam is so critical. That Rambam is over here in source number 6, in Hilchot Talmud Torah, Parak Aleph Halacha Yud Gimel. And in this Rambam, which is again the Rambam where at the end we'll see, is where he's going to say, don't teach Torah Sheba'al Peh, don't do it, right? But look at how he starts. The Rambam's opening line of this halacha, in which he's going to end by saying, don't teach your daughter Torah Sheba'al Peh. However, he starts by saying, Isha shalamda Torah yesh la schar. A woman who learns Torah receives a reward. Okay, that's it. Like, case open and shut. Like, you would never get a reward for doing something usher, for doing something prohibited. It's even an absurd suggestion. The very fact that the Rambam opens by saying a woman who learns Torah receives a reward, to me, it's like, there are other proofs as well, but like, to me, this is it even. This is like open and shut case. We get a reward. Clearly, it cannot be usher, cannot be prohibited. He goes on to say, we don't get as much reward as a man, but that's only because we're not commanded. And in general, there's a rule, which I won't go into now, that if you're commanded and you do, you get greater reward. But again, that's just an across the board thing that would apply to, again, a woman sitting in a sukkah also or whatever. But point being, she gets a reward. He then continues, the afal yesh laskar, even though she gets a reward, which again, to me is just so cut and dry. Clearly, it's not usher, it's not prohibited. But he says, even though she would get a reward, the rabbi said, don't do it. As we saw, right, because he thinks that women just, they weren't educated at his time. And it was inconceivable to him almost that a woman was capable of learning Gemara. He says, again, they're going to just twist and turn Torah, but again, not in the cunning way, in a way they're just not going to understand it. And they're making it into silliness because of the poorness of their minds. And therefore, Amru Chachamim, Kol Hamalamed Bito Torah Ki'ilu Lamda Tiflot. Again, he's quoting that line of Rabbi Eliezer, don't do it. It's teaching her Tiflot, which he's saying means they won't get it. And now he says famously, Bameh Dvarim Amurim. What are we talking about when we say, don't teach your daughter's Torah? The Rambam is the first to say, the Torah Sheba'al Peh, that's specifically the oral law, things like Gemara, that really would be teaching her Tiflot, she won't get it. Avol Torah Shebechtav, the written law, teaching her Chumash, Navi, right, Megillot, Ketuvim, Tehillim, whatever, even that, by the way, he says, Lo yilamedu ta lechatchila. It's important to see, the Rambam ideally, lechatchila thinks, don't even have Chumash class for your daughters, but the imlamda eno k'malamda tiflot. But if you taught her Chumash, if you taught her Tanakh, right, Navi Ketuvim, that's at least not tiflos. The real negative whatever of like tiflos, that's reserved for Torah Sheba'al Peh. Even Torah Shebechtav, he thinks don't do it. So again, somebody who's really saying, listen, I want to follow the Rambam, really shouldn't even be having Chumash class for the girls. However, he does say that's not as bad as teaching Gemara. Gemara, that's really like, off the charts tiflis, that's what you really, really shouldn't do. However, as I started by saying, I think it is so, so critical that this Rambam, who is the very source of saying that teaching Gemara is worse than Chumash, and again, in our world and even the right-wing world, it's almost like, of course, sim qua non, that of course all the girls are learning Chumash. It's so critical that he, who's the very source of saying Chumash is not as bad as Gemara, Gemara is the really off limits thing, he starts by saying, but she gets a reward. So it's so, so clear, I think, that it's not usher. And he himself explains that. Why does he discourage it? Because it was so clear to him at his time that it was just an exercise in futility. The women weren't going to get it. And therefore, that's where it's so, it just seems so clear that given that it wasn't usher, it wasn't prohibited, it was him giving strong advice. And again, we need to even take rabbinic advice seriously. But once it's advice, there's what to talk about. Does it or does it not apply anymore? He gives advice not to. It's clear that he explicitly is saying the reason for his advice is that women would not be capable. And therefore, it's so clear to be able to say, like, A leads to B leads to C. It's not usher. He says she gets a reward. By the way, another proof that it's not usher is that the language he uses, Sivu Chachamim, the rabbis commanded, which sounds like strong language. However, if you do a Google search or an Al HaTorah search or whatever, of all the times, or Sfaria search, whatever, right? Of all the times that the Rambam uses the phrase Sivu Chachamim, the rabbis commanded, again, sounds strong. But if you search for all the places he uses that term, it is always, always in the context of rabbinic advice, not in the context of actual, Isser, of actual prohibition. Again, point being that when you put it together with, actually, I'll even bring a third proof that it's definitely not usher, is all along, there have always throughout history been examples of women who were very learned. For example, Bruria, which ironically was actually, my high school was named after her. But she's quoted in the Gemara as having been a very learned woman, even in the realm of Torah Sheba'al Peh. Point being, if this were something usher, there wouldn't be room for exceptions, right? Like we would not have room to say, oh, because a woman is so learned, it's clear, right? That if it's mamish usher, if it's actually usher, there's no room for exceptions. The fact that there were exceptions, and she's quoted positively, she's praised for, wow, she was so smart, she was able to do it. You put all this together, again, the Rambam's language of Sivu Chachamim, which is always in the context of advice. The fact that he starts by saying she gets a reward. The fact that all throughout history, there were exceptions. You put that all together, and to me, it's like so clear that this was never prohibited. It was advice, right? And again, even advice we should take seriously, but there's at least what to talk about. And the fact that they're explaining that the reason for their advice was that they were so convinced that women were incapable. And Baruch Hashem, that we live in times where that has been completely, turned on its head. And women are, getting the same grades, going to schools like Maimonides, where they are in the same Gemara classes as their male counterparts, taking the same exams, getting the same scores, whether it's in Gemara class or in medical school or in law school or whatever it is. That women are, in fact, quite capable as soon as you give us the opportunity. And therefore, I would like to hope, again, it would be presumptuous to be certain, so I'm certainly not certain. However, I would like to hope that had the Rambam been alive now in 2023 and seen what women are capable of, seen the Batei Midrash, seen this group of people, which again, I know also has men, but also has women, and had he seen, I would like to believe that he would have been blown away and would have been thrilled to cross out this, this halacha and be like, this is amazing. Yes, women are capable. And once I know they're capable, then why on earth would we ever want to deprive them of this? And especially, I would say, people like the Rambam, who Rav Melamed actually focuses on this aspect, who talks in glowing terms that he really believes that the way to come to Avat Hashem, to love of God, is through intellectual learning, is through understanding, is through learning Torah and even learning about the world, learning science. But it's through learning and understanding that one really comes to love and develop a true, deep, meaningful relationship with their Creator. Then again, how could anybody want to deprive women of that? And in fact, the opposite, I would think, would want to encourage it, up to the sky. And that, in fact, is what we then end up seeing Again, I'll sort of go a little more quickly through some of these. But basically, the Chavetz Chaim, it's important to be aware, was one of the first who was actually, he was asked by Sarah Schneerer when she wanted to en masse sort of create, right, a learning institution, right, for girls, right, the Beis Yaakov movement, which ironically we now associate with kind of being more conservative with a lowercase c. But at its time, it was revolutionary to create schools for girls, not to just have, the one girl here and there learning in her basement with her father, but having schools for girls. She asked the Gadol Hador, the Chavetz Chaim, the author of the Mishnah Berurah, and he basically says that now that if we don't teach them, they're going to go off the derech, they're going to be going off to, secular education, that we have to teach them. Again, at that point, he doesn't yet, though, talk about Gemara per se, but about, yes, educating girls. Rav Moshe, right, Rav Moshe Feinstein, one of the really Gedolei Hador, he also, I have to say, does not really encourage learning of Torah Shabbal Peh. However, he does say that, of course, we need to teach girls and educate girls. He just thinks that the curriculum should consist of things that will bring them to, loving God and things like that. Again, I would like to hope that had he even lived an extra 50 years later, that he would have even encouraged Torah Shabbal Peh. But in particular, what I want to get to is just to see these letters, again, from say, in particular, Rav Soloveitchik, where when he was asked about what should be the curriculum for girls, he writes, again, it's relatively short, but it's important to see in his words where he wrote, "Dear Rabbi Rosenfeld, please accept my apologies for not answering your letters sooner. The delay was due to my overcrowded schedule. As to your question with regard to a curriculum in a co-educational school, I expressed my opinion too long ago that it would be a very regrettable oversight on our part if we were to arrange separate Hebrew courses for girls. Not only is the teaching of Torah Shabbal Peh to girls permissible, but it is nowadays an absolute imperative. This policy of discrimination between the sexes as to subject matter and method of instruction, which is still advocated by certain groups within our Orthodox community, has contributed greatly to the deterioration and downfall of traditional Judaism. Boys and girls alike should be introduced into the inner halls of Torah Shabbal Peh." And he then closes by saying, "I hope to prepare in the near future a halachic brief on the problem, which will exhaust the various aspects of the same." Sadly, as far as I'm aware, I don't think he ever did that. I wish he had, but I would like to think that he would have written all of what we just said and would have gone through the sources and gone through, again, the Sigin Kiddushin, which says that women are exempt, and then gone through, yes, the Mishnah in Sotah, where Rabbi Eliezer says it's teaching her Tiflis, and gone through the Rambam, where he says, don't do it in Torah Shabbal Peh, even worse, but explains that the reason is they won't understand. But starts by saying, again, they get a reward, and there were exceptions all along, and the language of Sivu Chachamim shows it wasn't usher, and therefore to show that, again, it's not prohibited, it's rabbinic advice. And as I said, I would like to believe that had the Rambam been alive, he would have said exactly what Rav Soloveitchik is saying, which is basically this idea of, thank God that we live in a time where we see that women are capable, and once they're capable, then this is the most incredible thing. And of course, we should be encouraging and enabling and doing everything within our power, as Rav Soloveitchik himself did by starting Maimonides, where the girls were taught Gemara side by side with their male counterparts. And he taught one of the opening shiurim in Stern College, right, to show that he really put his money where his mouth was. And really believed in giving women access to this most incredible, world of learning. I always say I feel so lucky and so privileged to be learning and living now when women have unprecedented opportunities. And I'm so frequently asked, I'll stop the share screen for a minute. Wait, do that for a second here, just so I can see more of you. I always feel like I'm often asked also by students of mine whether I feel, I don't know, almost like in any way disenfranchised, or feel that my opportunities were limited because of being a woman. And I have to say, I actually, thank God, feel in many ways the opposite. I feel like I have gotten to live and be part of a revolution. Like, how people get to say that? Like, my own students, I feel like in many ways were born, and again, they're not that much younger than me. And yet in just those 2 decades, they grow up and just take for granted that of course they can learn, of course they can sit in a Beit Midrash, of course they can open up a Gemara. And you know, in many ways, again, in a minute, I'll share even some of my angst that I had. But despite the angst and some of the trauma that I went through, in many ways, I really feel like it was worth it, because it was only because of going through the angst and the trauma and the questioning and whatever that I can appreciate what a gift it is, what a gift to be able to have access to this level of learning, and to feel like I got to witness the change and the development, and not just to witness, but to be part of it, to be part of, you know, a Siyumim like this and groups like this, and a Daf Yomi group. I'm part of an all women's Daf Yomi group. Local, it's I don't know, like, again, the opposite. So in many ways, perhaps it can be, you know, upsetting to read that line of Rebbe Eliezer, but to me, at the same time, the living when we live, I actually feel like it's given us tremendous, I don't know, like, opportunities to really embrace and appreciate what we have that we didn't before. Just to share one last story, which I think is partially why Anne even asked me to be the one to speak about this, is as I mentioned, so I went to a high school that did not teach girls Gemara. And so I first really got into it when I attended the Drisha Summer High School program, the summer after 12th grade. And then when I got to Stern, I really, like, you know, delved into it, and it really just, again, just opened my eyes and my world, and just like, I can't even imagine, like, at this point, like, my Judaism without Gemara. It's just so intertwined. But I shortly after I began to, like, get into this whole world, went to a wedding where one of my teachers from high school was at the wedding, and I had been very, very close with her in high school. And I actually, to this day, have very, like, warm, like, admiration and feelings towards her. But we basically missed the entire wedding, because literally, like, she pulled me outside to the hallway, and we literally spent hours talking outside in the hallway, where she was, again, expressing a genuine concern for me, but, like, concern that this is really, like, taking me on a bad path. And specifically because it came from somebody who really cared about me, and I knew that's where it was coming from, it actually totally sent me into a tailspin. And I really, like, did not know what to do. Anyway, and then it turns out that Rav Lichtenstein, like, was actually coming to America, Rav Aaron Lichtenstein from the Gush, who, the son-in-law of the Rav, who absolutely, you know, it's his daughter who started Migdal Oz. Anyway, he was coming to America. Anyway, I walked like 100 blocks that Shabbos so that I could go and, like, speak to him. The ending of the story, unfortunately, is that I wish that he had simply said to me, yes, this is wonderful, of course you should learn and teach girls Gemara. Any of you who know anything about Rav Lichtenstein, he just doesn't talk like that. Like, he doesn't talk, like, he goes through all the sources, and he goes through all the pros and the cons. And so I kind of ended like, wait, I can't even tell, what was he telling me? But the point is that it's clear, though, from his writings and from his actions and from what he did with his own, like, daughters, that again, that this is, like, that this is so clear where he wanted it to go. And more than that, what I would end with, and I think is so important, is that it is specifically, I think, people like Rav Soloveitchik and like Rav Lichtenstein, who it's so clear that for them, learning for them themselves was not about, like, well, I'm chayev, so what can I do? I have to learn Torah because I'm chayev. It was so much more than that. This was like the air they breathed was Talmud Torah. In fact, I always find that such a powerful story about it. I hope it's true. I assume it is. I've heard it from numerous sources, that, like, after Tisha B'Av, that Rav Lichtenstein would run straight to the Beit Midrash, and rather than run straight to the Chadar Ochel, rather than run straight to eat, he would run to learn. And the people say, how could you be running to learn? How could you not be running to eat? And he said, you know, for the last 25 hours, I couldn't eat and I couldn't learn. And now I have the opportunity to do both. It's, like, not a question which one I'm, like, starving for more is to go learn. And I think that it's specifically coming from a perspective like that, where it's not about the chiyuv. Like, yes, that's true. That's a man is chayav, woman's not, but that really the yearning for Talmud Torah is coming from just this sense of, like, Torah is the air I breathe. So, you know, whether I'm chayav or not, you know, is not what's going to determine whether I do it. I do this because I love it. I do this because this is how I can access a connection to God and to halacha and to Judaism and to, you know, everything that's meaningful to me in this religion. And so again, as I said, thank God, like our poskim, like Rav Soloveitchik and like Rav Lichtenstein, were absolutely behind this. And even though, yes, there absolutely are sources like the Mishnah in Sotah that are against it, I hope that this helps explain how those of us who are doing it not only justify it, but feel incredibly proud to be part of this revolution. Anyway, if
Okay,
anybody
let's see if
has
we have any
questions.
questions. I guess raise your hand on the Zoom.
I
if
do
you
have a
question.
comment.
Please.
Okay. I think that
Just
there
say who you are, who's
definitely,
speaking.
I'm
Sorry.
sorry, Miriam Weed. I've been learning with Dina for a number of years, but I haven't been learning with the rest of you. So I think that there is definitely a somewhat difference of opinion between someone like Rav Melamed and what we heard from Rav Soloveitchik. Rav Melamed definitely goes more with the Rambam of saying that it shouldn't be a curriculum, it shouldn't be required, that his interpretation of don't teach is don't force it upon. But once there's any desire, he then quotes Rav Rabinovich as saying that the Rambam himself, so Dina was hesitant to say this, Rav Rabinovich had no hesitation in saying, based on the Rambam's description of Avat Hashem and of his specific reference to men, women, old, young, and to you know, Torah Shebichav and Torah Shebal Peh and the details, etc. Rav Rabinovich explains the Rambam to say that that the difference between men and women is that for men it's a chiyuv, and for women it needs to come from a desire, but says even according to the Rambam, this is the ideal. The Rambam just didn't see a way to believe it.
Yes, absolutely. And actually that was one of the sources that I skipped, was the Prisha also talks about that, yes, that if she wants to, that it's only called Hamalamed Bito Torah, like anybody who's sort of forcing it on her and teaching her, that's the problem. But as soon as she wants it and is seeking it out, that then, again, I was going more of the route exactly as Miriam was saying of, you know, sort of the change in times and our capability, but there is also definitely that approach as well, that what they would discourage is women being forced into it as soon as they want it, that would be that then it would be fine, and even the Rambam would say that that's fine. Absolutely.
I would like to add, if possible, the issue with the Rambam is almost paradoxical, because his criteria for a Navi is so high, right? The bar he set, the person has to learn all of Torah, including Torah Shebal Peh. And there are 7 Neviot, okay? Some of them, of course, before Matan Torah, but the majority after. And he has to reconcile that, obviously, with his understanding of what a Navi is. So it's impossible for him to say that it's prohibited, and this person who's learning Torah against the rule is becoming a Neviah. It doesn't go together. In other words, makes no sense whatsoever, according to his own philosophy. Also, the Mechaber, even though he says it's not important to teach Torah to women, but on the other hand, he insists that the women make the bracha every morning on Limud Torah, because they have to learn halacha, basic halacha. They have to know what to do and when. How can you differentiate that from Torah Shebal Peh in general? I mean, of course, you can give a list of things, say, okay, you have to do this and that, but she has to understand it. She can't run to a Rav every second she has a shiloh. She has to have some kind of background to understand laws of kashrut, and that's already teaching her Torah Shebal Peh.
Yes, interestingly, the Ramah, which again is on the source sheet, but I skipped it for time, does talk about that a woman is obligated to learn those halachot that she's obligated in. And many people try to use that to say, oh, you see, you know, as long as it's something relevant, she can learn anything and everything. I've always found that, though, a bit tenuous, because when the Ramah talks about a woman being obligated to learn those things she's obligated in, it could just mean that at some point somebody should sit her down and like give her a laundry list of here's what you need to do to keep a kosher kitchen and here's what you need to do to keep Shabbos. Again, some people do take that idea of she needs to know what to do to say that if she's learning a Masechet like Shabbos or, Hulin for Kashrus or Nida or whatever, that then the sky is the limit. She can learn everything, but I don't know. To me, it always seemed like he's just trying to say, despite this discouragement of teaching her, make sure at some point you just tell her what to do. But it could go either way. There definitely are those who justify women's learning through that avenue of saying, well, she has to know what to do. So, teach her in depth those things. And the other thing, by the way, which I don't love about that approach is, what about those masechtot that are not so relevant, like Sotah, which again, we see it does have relevant parts, but a lot of it, as Yardena spoke about, we haven't implemented in centuries. So like, that's what I don't love about that approach also, is that it sort of limits what women can learn to those things that are relevant. And I think the whole Beit Midrash should be open to us.
Rabbanit Dina, would you be okay with sending us your source sheet? Because a few
Absolutely.
people have
Sure.
requested if we could send the source sheet out to them also.
Absolutely. Who should I do that? I should send that to you and you'll send it, because I don't.
Yeah, we'll
like,
send it
how
out.
should
We
I do
send
that?
we send a recording out and we'll send it out. Anybody else have
Perfect.
any other comments or questions? Okay. All right. Thank you so much. I think this like sort of gets to the core of, this explosion we've seen of women participating and learning, and particularly in Daf Yomi today. And I think it's key to understand what these issues were and how did we actually get to where we are today in terms of Jewish history.
Absolutely.
And it's
Really, thank you.
ironic or
Thank you all
something
so
that
much.
it comes in Sotah.
Yeah.
Always interesting. It comes in Sotah. So thank you, Rabbanit Dina, and I hope we will have the privilege of learning with you again soon.
Sure. Absolutely. Really. Thank you all so much. It's really so impressive that you're all here, and thank you. Thank you for all joining. Thank you so much.
Okay, Yardena.
Yeah, so we're going to finish up. We like to keep these to an hour. And as I said, I actually have to run. So I'm going to I will read the end of the Gemara and we'll say the Hadran. I don't think we'll see all of you until, when does
August.
Gittin end? What?
August,
right? I don't think for a
Although
while.
I feel like we didn't know that we have done 18 Masechtot, which I feel
Wow.
is a milestone in all of it.
Oh, we've done Chai. That's very nice. Okay.
Mhm.
I think there's a lot to be said about that. All right, so I'm going to do the end of the Gemara
Exactly.
here, which I mentioned already at the beginning. Mishamei Rabbi Batla and Avav Yerachet, right from when Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi died, humility and the fear of sin ended. Amrle Rav Yosef Latana. So Rav Yosef said to the Tana when he was teaching this Mishnah, Lat nitne anava deika ana, right? Don't teach humility because I am humble. Remember, and Rav Yosef is saying this as an Amora and Bavel. Amarle Rav Nachman Latana. Rav Nachman also said to the Tana when he taught this Mishnah in the Beit Midrash, Lot nitne yirachet deika ana, right? And Rav Nachman also says, don't teach about the fear of sin because I still have fear of sin. So these things that we thought we lost, we still actually carry on with us.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, you can say the Hadra now.
Okay, here we go. Hadranach Masechet Sotah v'Hadranach. Tatanach Masechet Sotah v'Tatanach. Alan. Lo nitnesei minach Masechet Sotah v'lo nitnesei minan. Lo ba'alma hadin v'lo ba'alma da'ate. Hi ratzon mefanech Adonai Eloheinu v'Elohei avotenu shetehei tvaratcha u'manatenu ba'olam hazeh u'tehei imanu le'olam haba. Chanina bar Papa Rami bar Papa Nachman bar Papa Achai bar Papa Abba Mari bar Papa Rafram bar Papa Rachish bar Papa Surchav bar Papa Ada bar Papa Daru bar Papa Ha'erevna Adonai Eloheinu et divrei Toratcha b'finu v'lefi Amcha Beit Yisrael v'niyah anachnu l'tzetzeinu v'tzetzei Amcha Beit Yisrael kulanu yodei shmecha v'lomdei Toratcha lishma me'oivai תחכמני מצוותיך כי לעולם יהי ליבי תמים בחוקיך למען לא אבוש לעולם לא אשכח פקודיך כי חייתני ברוך אתה אדוני למדני חוקיך אמן 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 סלע ועד מודים אנחנו לפניך אדוני אלוהינו ואלוהינו ששמת חלקנו מיושבי בית המדרש ולא שמת חלקנו מיושבי קרנות שאנו משכימים והם משכימים אנו משכימים לדברי תורה והם משכימים לדברים בטלים, אנו עמלים והם עמלים, אנו עמלים ומקבלים שכר, והם עמלים ואינם מקבלים שכר. אנו רצים והם רצים, אנו רצים לחיי העולם הבא, והם רצים לבאר שחת. שנאמר, ואתה אלוהים תורידם לבאר שחת, אנשי דמים ומרימה לא יחצו ימיהם, ואני אבטח בך. יהי רצון לפניך, אדוני אלוהי, כשם שעזרתני לסיים מסכת סוטה, כן תעזריני להתחיל מסכתות וספרים אחרים ולסיימם, ללמוד וללמד, לשמור ולעשות ולקיים את כל דברי תלמוד תורתך באהבה, ולזכות כל התנאים והמורים ותלמידי חכמים יעמוד לי, ולזרעי שלא תמוש תורה מפי ומפי זרעי, וזרע זרעי עד עולם, ויתקיים בי בהתהלכך, תנחה אותך בשכבך, תשמור עליך, והקיצותה היא תשיחך. כי בי ירבו ימיך ויוסיפו לך שנות חיים, אורך ימים בימינה ובשמאלה, עושר וכבוד. אדוני עוז ימו ייתן, אדוני יברך את עמו בשלום.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Great to learn with you. On to getting together, and we'll see you all soon.
Thank
I
you
see one of
all.
my students on. I
Thank
see
you.
Emma, who I need to give a shout out
Thank
to.
you.
Zalta.
Thank you very much.